Hello,
Good day.
I am Matt,
I am Austin.
and this is Drunken Storytime.
That means we're going to be drinking and telling you stories.
Some stories you know,
Some stories you don't.
so sit back and relax. In tonight's episode, we're gonna tell you the story
Of Hansel and Gretel.
of Hansel and Gretel. Oh,
Gretel and Hansel.
that one.
Austin and Matt, Matt and Austin. Austin and Matt, Matt and Austin. Happy fun time hour.
So, Hansel and Gretel. What can I say about Hansel and Gretel?
Hansel and Gretchen, who are two children that had zero things to do.
Living in Germany, like the 1500s, not much to do around then, except, go outside and fuck with the cattle and, go for walks and shit.
Because it was a long time ago, and they decided that they would just go walking through the woods because that's safe. Today we know that is how you get raped and murdered, is by walking through the woods. But back then they had no idea because TV didn't exist. I know it's hard to believe. There was no Facebook, no MySpace. Yeah, don't even start me on that. No Snapchat, no Twitter, nothing. They had no idea.
Right? No walking in the woods, no walking in the woods. And finally Gretel chimes up and she says, "Hey Hansel, how the fuck we supposed to find our way back home? I've never been in the woods before, have you? No? So what the fuck are we doing?" In order to calm his bitchy sister down, Hansel's like, "Alright, bitch, we're gonna lay some breadcrumbs. Alright? I'll throw some breadcrumbs on the ground every couple of feet so that we can find our way back. All that happy horse shit. Can you come the fuck down now and just go on the walk?"
They're leaving breadcrumbs everywhere because we got to find our way back, right? That's what people do. They leave breadcrumbs. I mean, I still do it. I go to work and I leave breadcrumbs. I drop breadcrumbs out my window. I got pulled over once, but that, sometimes it just happens. He said it was littering. I said I was just trying to find my way home. He let me out with a verbal warning.
And so they're walking along, and like Gretel sees some pretty birds, and Hansel's like, "Oh yeah, that's fucking cool. Here's some breadcrumbs."
They're walking through the woods. They're leaving breadcrumbs everywhere, just making a mess, littering like there's no tomorrow. I don't even think there was a law for littering back then. Anyway, they're starting to get to a point where they're kind of hungry.
Finally, Hansel himself, not Gretel. You'd think it was Gretel, the little bitch, that would chime up and be like, "I'm fucking tired." No, it was Hansel. Hansel chimes up and he's like, "I'm tired."
They start asking themselves, maybe we should head back. But against their better judgment, they decide to just keep walking because who needs food, right?
Woodland critters are doing their woodland critter shit, like fucking singing songs and flying around and baking pies and shit.
They finally come across this house.
And this house is fucking primo.
Made of gingerbread. It's a gingerbread house, but real life, IRL, life size.
Top-notch craftsmanship. And they realize the entire goddamn thing's made of gingerbread and fucking gumdrops.
A gingerbread house with gumdrops and candy canes and lollipops and whatever else. I don't know who built it. I don't know why they would build it. It sounds like an awful design. I feel like the rain would tear it away and animals would eat it. It's just a bad idea.
They're like, "Holy shit, we've been walking for like 4.5 hours. Like, what the fuck? Like, somebody literally made an entire house for us to eat."
Anyway, they decide to start eating the house because why wouldn't you eat a house? That's what I do. I just eat houses all day.
"We don't have to go back to mom and dad. Fuck mom and dad. We got our own house now. We can live there forever, and we can eat there, and we never have to leave, and it's made of candy. It's fucking awesome."
Anyway, this lady pops out of the door and is like, Hey
kids.
you're eating my house. Why don't you come inside? I will give you actual food."
I've made some food. Are you hungry?
And they're like, "Oh, thanks."
So, well, come on in. So they decide to fucking go in because they've never seen a goddamn PSA. They don't know what stranger danger is. I mean, like I said, it's the 1500s. She's feeding them turkey.
So she makes them a nice Thanksgiving dinner.
She's feeding them ham.
And then a Christmas dinner.
She's feeding them mutton chops.
A St. Patrick's Day dinner.
Boiled cabbage.
Corned beef and cabbage is just a natural thing that they eat.
Oh, you're doing so fucking good. Hang on.
He's not letting me tell my story. I'm being oppressed. Anyway, so this lady's just feeding these kids all this food. So much food. It is insane the amount of food they're eating.
And they just keep going to town and going.
They are so fat, they can't even move. Turns out she is an awful, evil witch.
So they finally realize that the witch is standing behind them and she's rubbing her hands together and she's drooling and shit,
She turns the oven on, preheats the oven to 400 degrees, 375 maybe.
She opens up the oven and tries to shove them in there, and they start freaking out. They're like, what the fuck? This fucking bitch!
Turns out that's a bad idea. The kids don't want to be cooked. I don't do well in the summertime. I can't imagine being in an oven that's 375, 400 degrees or higher. I'm not even sure how a gingerbread house has electricity, but apparently it does.
So they tricked the witch, right? The witch was trying to shove them into the oven, but those sly motherfuckers, they decided no.
They trick her somehow. They get around behind her and they push her in the oven.
And they cooked her at 475 for about 65 to 85 minutes, or until golden brown. And once she was well done, they consumed her flesh.
I don't know. I didn't see any of the news articles. I didn't hear any news stories. Again, it was 400 or 500 years ago, so it's probably not relevant. I didn't see anything on Twitter.
So Hansel and Gretel, they eat the witch, right? But because it's the 1500s, there's not any sort of like security in the community at all. So the kids never came home because they couldn't find their way home because somebody else had eaten the breadcrumbs. So the parents never sent anyone to find them. And so what happened was they wound up occupying the half-eaten gingerbread house and remaining cannibals for most of their lives.
You know, the kids went on to live their rebellious lives. They went home, no sugar, sugar-free diet, kind of a keto diet, if you will. Parents were kind of mad at them. They went through the rebellious stage, started smoking cigarettes, smoking pot, doing hard drugs like cocaine and heroin. Eventually they died by the time they were 23. But, you know, I guess that's just 1500s Germany, you know? It is what it is.
Basically, you have a story that all it's trying to do is tell you, hey, you know, be careful, don't go off willy-nilly. You gotta be cautious because one walk in the woods could turn into, great, now you're a cannibal for life.
And this, with an empty bottle of sake, has been the story of Hansel and Gretel. Hansen and Gretchen. Hansel and Chris Hansen. And Gretchen and... Who makes those guitars? Gretsch. Gretsch Guitars and Chris Hansen. Gretsch Guitars and Hans Gretchen. Gretsch Hansen.
Okay.
Hans
All
Gretchen.
right. No, that's no.